Josh, welcome to the show, man. Great to visit with you.
Absolutely. I'm glad to be here today. Something to do on a boring Monday in December when most of my deer hunting is tapered off.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, speaking of that, how was your fall?
It was pretty good. I had some solid success. I hunt my family's farm in central Minnesota. That's kind of where I started deer hunting when I was a kid, and actually ended up shooting my biggest whitetail of my life there this year during slug season. It's a deer I'd been watching for a year and was fortunate to connect with him. And then recently had some success in Oklahoma, which was a whole lot of fun. We had a camp out there. We just set up a wall tent on an oil pad and
Nice.
just went out there and chased some of those deer. But I've been struggling in Wisconsin. I've been hunting that. I've got well over 100 hours on stand over there, and man, it's just been one thing after another. So I don't know if I'm going to catch up with one before the season closes or before they drop their antlers.
And so, wait, where did you say you shot your biggest whitetail?
That's in central Minnesota. My family has a farm there. It's actually three different parcels, but
Mm-hmm.
collectively we've kind of had that for about 130 years.
Nice.
Yeah.
And so, what is what did it score? I mean, that's a trophy. Obviously, is relative to where you shot it and the person that shot it, right? I mean, a trophy means something different to everybody, but it's your biggest whitetail, and you
Yeah,
probably put a tape to him or have an idea of what it scored.
I did. It's actually the first deer I've ever shot that I have put a tape to. I just had my taxidermist do it when I brought his hide and antlers in there to drop him off, and um, he he green scored him at 157.
Oh
So
wow,
I'll
nice
probably end
buck.
up getting him. I'll have someone throw another one on there just because it's so close to the 160 mark. I'd just be curious to know if he did crack that.
Yeah.
But either way, he was either 5.5 or 6.5. Come to find out, the neighbor was also after him, so he had some more history. And
Mm.
I'd never met this guy before, and he randomly found me through Facebook. And we have a big buck contest, old school small town stuff in Minnesota. I went in there to go weigh my deer with no intention of trying to put it in any sort of contest or anything. And kid who works there is like, "Hey, you want to put your deer in the contest?" I'm like,
Mm.
"Well, how much does that cost?" He's like, "Oh, it's free. We'll just weigh them and take your picture, and that's it." And I'm like, "All right, well, I don't plan on winning the contest, but I might as well enter it anyways. It's kind of fun." And lo and behold, my picture's up on this board with probably 50, 60 other people.
Mm.
And dude is looking through the pictures, recognizes the deer, even though it's hanging upside down from a scale, somehow tracks me down through Facebook. And I try to maintain a pretty low profile up there, and pretty much anywhere I go, I just kind of keep to myself and whatnot. And he hits me up, and long story short, he's got a bunch of history with the deer, and he's got the last 2 years of matched sheds that he's
Mm.
demanding to give to me to go with the mount, which is unreal.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, like
Man, I like hearing stuff. I mean, hunters at our core, good people.
for
So
sure.
is the contest done by body weight, or is that 157 the marker?
It's by body weight. That's how a lot
This
of
is an old school. I mean, this is like,
yeah,
most contests these days are done by, well, okay, how big are the antlers? Like what kind of rack
right.
does it have? So this is actual, like, who shot the biggest actual animal?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think I don't know, I can't remember how they split it up, but they've got like a couple different ranges. So
Hmm.
like I think it's like under 200 pounds and over 200 pounds or something like that. And my deer actually didn't even weigh that much. I don't know if he was just if he had lost a bunch of weight or if he just didn't have that big of a body to begin with. The pictures seemed like he had a pretty stocky body, but then I killed him like midway through the rut, so I'm sure he lost something. But no, there were definitely a lot of bigger bodied deer that were killed up there. I mean, we're in central Minnesota, so we're not all that far from Canada, and
Do you have
I'm
wolves?
sure. What's that?
Do you have wolves up there?
Unfortunately, um, we just got our first wolf on camera this year, and
Uh,
they've just been cascading south. I mean, that's been the
mm,
trend for the last 15, 20 years. It is a real problem. There actually is a somewhat of an uprising going on right now. In fact, I was thinking about going to a meeting this evening. There's a group in Minnesota called Hunters for Hunters that formed, and that's been kind of their main deal. People are very upset with the state and federal government for not looking at it from a more objective management perspective for wolf management in Minnesota, and
Well, I mean,
it's a real problem.
I think Minnesota's hands are tied, though, right? Like it's the feds that are like
Yeah,
because the western states, well, three, Idaho, Wyoming, Montana, they can have wolf seasons. They can attempt to manage their own wolf populations to a certain extent. The Great Lakes region has no wolf season. They're federally protected there, and for what reason, nobody seems to know, other than it's all politics and an emotionally driven thing. But I saw an article last week in Outdoor Life, and it maybe the group that you were mentioning, Hunters for Hunters, was in there. I don't recall their name, but it was essentially Minnesota hunters, an outcry saying, "Hey, we are not seeing the deer that we're used to seeing historically, and it's because of wolves. You can't, you can't let apex predators continue to just go unchecked." And we harp on that all the time on this program. The listeners are, well, they might be tired of me saying that, but here's another example from a state that we don't typically touch on, Minnesota. And you just said you got your first wolf on camera, unfortunately.
yeah, it's man, with any aspect of wildlife management, there are always way more factors than just one, but this is a big one, and it's become apparent that it's a big one. And we've watched it happen now for, like I said, I mean, it's probably even been, I don't know, I bet you it's been closer to like 15, 20 years that we've really started to see the decline. It became more noticeable to me within the last like 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
It went from just in passing talking to other deer hunters from Minnesota, because I mean, our historically our more traditional deer camps were in the northern half of the state. In the southern half of the state is a little bit newer in terms of like historical terms for deer hunting. So the real traditional deer camps are still in the northern half of the state, and that goes for Wisconsin as well. But they're evaporating. People are just they're not going anymore because you just started hearing stories. Yeah, only saw a few deer, a lot of wolf tracks, and now it's like we saw no deer. There's wolf tracks every square foot. My brother was just up hunting there a couple weeks ago for muzzleloader season.
Uh-huh.
Same thing. He said you couldn't stand this road that they were on. I think this road is like 8 miles long. He said you couldn't stand on any stretch of the road without seeing wolf tracks crossing it. And they didn't see, uh, while they were hunting, I don't think they saw one deer, not one.
Wow.
Um, which is just, I mean, that's just absurd. If you're out there, even just for a 3-day hunt with 6 guys covering a bunch of ground and you don't see a whitetail, like that's a big problem.
Yeah.
Now, our winters are a big part of it, and there are some other things, and habitat, blah blah blah. But man, I tell you what, when you get 3-4 feet of snow like we did last year, and the wolves can just dominate running on that stuff, and the deer are all yarded up in winter herds, and they can't move through the snow very fast. It's just easy pickings. A pack of
Mm-hmm.
wolves can come in and just have a frenzy. And if they wipe out one wintering herd, you can wipe out the huntable population for a large area, because those are deer that have congregated from a huge radius. And as we've seen time and time again, they don't just eat what they need, like
Yeah.
people like to
Common
believe.
myth. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, imagine if you were a wolf, if you were a canine, and a bunch of you and your buddies ran into a bunch of food, you aren't going to stop snapping necks until movement ceases,
Right. Right.
right? You're
Yeah.
not just going to be like, I mean, they're dogs. Watch how
Oh.
dogs, regular domestic dogs, interact. Um, like
Do
when they
they kill when the dog gets into the chicken coop? Does he just kill one chicken?
exactly,
No, he
he
doesn't.
goes
I've seen
until
it firsthand when I was a
movement.
kid. We
Yeah,
had pit bulls get in our, and nothing against pit bulls, but that's what they were, and they got in our chicken coop, and they killed every chicken in there. They didn't eat any of them. They just killed them to kill them.
And those are domestic dogs generally know better too. And you know, those those wild dogs are, they don't have to face any repercussions from anybody. They're
Mhm.
not going to get kenneled up or slapped on the ass for going in the chicken coop. They're just going to go about their business.
And
So
in Minnesota, they're not gonna get shot. So, yeah, it's a big problem.
yeah.
But I think the only thing we can do is continue to raise hell and try to get somebody's attention, you know. And so we'll continue to do that because it's utterly ridiculous that they're placed on a pedestal when we know that, like, population wise, it doesn't warrant it. They're fine. They're doing great. They're moving south. Why? Because they're killing all the deer up there. Now they got to go find more deer. You got to
Hmm.
expand the range. Um, Enough about that. Tell us about yourself. I mean, obviously, you're a big whitetail hunter. Do you enjoy hunting other things?
I do. Yeah. I hunt basically everything I can. I try
Mm.
to do a bunch of different things year to year. There was actually probably a 5 or 6 year phase where I didn't whitetail hunt a whole lot. I just got so obsessed with doing the whole Western stuff that I spent most of my time in the fall out there. So mule deer and pronghorn, and I did caribou a couple years ago up in the Arctic Circle, and turkeys are the kryptonite for me. I hunt.
Now, you smiled when you said that, so I could see it in your eyes. Like, yeah, this dude likes his spring turkey hunting. I'm the same
Yeah,
way.
I can't even help it. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a lot of guys just think it's don't take it seriously, especially like hardcore whitetail hunters or big game hunters. I do both, but when spring hits, I'll go from mid-March to June 1st every spring as hard as I can.
Hmm.
That's
We get
my
4 tags in Texas, so we're very blessed in that aspect.
yeah.
Um, yeah. So, what do you do at HuntStand? How long have you been there? And then also, you got to tell us about you mentioned to me when we were trying to line up this interview that you were filming a hunt somewhere. So I don't know if that's another, like, thing you do to supplement your income, or you're filming it for HuntStand. I have no idea, but yeah, just tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I mean, just the quick story, my background started at a hunting magazine 13 years ago when I first got into the quote unquote hunting industry, and just kind of evolved from there. Ended up going from that hunting magazine to doing a lot of freelance for most of the national publications. And then ended up taking a job with one of the very first mobile apps for hunting called Scoutlook that existed. Basically, HuntStand, Scoutlook, and OnX were the first serious hunting apps, mapping applications. There were some like game call apps and like, a sunrise sunset app out there for hunters at the time. But in terms of a robust app, those were the three that really kicked it off, were Scoutlook, HuntStand, and then when OnX transitioned from just offering the micro SD in your GPS units to go on mobile, we all kind of did that around that same time within about a year.
Yeah.
And so Scoutlook and HuntStand had a heavy focus in the whitetail market from day one. We were competitors, very similar feature sets. And long story short, ended up deciding that it made more sense to join forces than to keep trying to compete against each other. So Scoutlook rolled into HuntStand about 3-4 years ago now. I can't even keep track. And joined the HuntStand team. So with that, with my role, a big part of what I did at Scoutlook, well, it was everything because there was like three of us running the company, but content, because it's always been something that I've been passionate about, and that's what my background comes with, a journalism degree and all that. That was one thing that Scoutlook had a lot of. So just between articles and emails and video content, we did a lot of that there. We brought that over into HuntStand across all those channels and then also social media. And it was kind of just the match made in heaven. HuntStand was excelling on the technology side. Scoutlook was doing a little bit better on the media and marketing side. And we just joined forces, and the rest is history.
So did HuntStand ever have those chips? Because I know I have a pile of like Onyx ones somewhere that I can't believe we used to do that, right? But then we
Yeah.
also used to, and I
Wild.
still have a few stealth cams where I actually, I want really good video, so um, maybe I still have a few that where I'm checking the SD cards, but
I do too.
SD
Yeah,
cards are like becoming obsolete slowly but surely,
they
and
are for sure.
yeah, it's funny to look back on how this stuff specifically, cell cameras and this mapping technology, has changed probably more than anything else I can think of in the hunting industry in the last decade.
Oh yeah, I mean
You get a
it,
new compound bow, congrats! Now you're shooting 10 FPS faster than you were last year.
right.
Not minimal difference, but this stuff
Yeah,
is just like, whoa, 5 years ago, we were paying $20 a camera for a monthly fee. Now you can $5 for 500 photo, whatever it is.
yeah,
That's just one example, but it's all changed. The cameras are smaller. I think they're more durable, even though they're smaller. They're more affordable. I remember the first GX wireless I had. I think those were like $350 or something. Now you can get a
yeah.
Fusion or a Deceptor for like, $120 or something, minimal. It's crazy.
Well, you made a good point though. I mean, it is fundamentally it's probably the most important or I guess impactful change that we've seen, or I guess catalyst for change is on the mobile mapping side, really.
Hmm.
Because what that's done is we always talk about the challenges of access as hunters. That has increased access easily single-handedly more than anything that we've ever done. And as a result, people are able to make more of their time that they do have and spend more time and go deeper, go farther, all that kind of stuff. So everything else has followed suit. Um, like you talk about, you use the bow reference, might be shooting 10 feet per second faster, or it's 4 pounds lighter. Well,
Right.
when people were just walking 100 yards to a deer stand and climbing in a tree, that 4 pounds probably didn't matter as much. But now that people are, hunting from saddles and going deep into public land and, canoeing down rivers and etc. Like I think just that level of access, and it's kind of like driven people a little more hardcore at every level, and all the other gear had to follow suit.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, but then there's other things like there on my deer lease out west. There's this one pond. It's like everyone, you could see it from one of the county roads, and but it's kind of tucked back in there. But if you drive by slow enough, you can see if there's ducks on it. And I was talking to the guys in camp, and I'm relatively new. This is only my second season on the lease, and I was like, "Is that on our property?" Every one of those guys said, "Yes, it is," but nobody's ever hunted it. And they all thought it was, and so I'm like, "Okay, cool. I'm gonna go just go over there and take a look and see where I could set up with the dog tomorrow." I get over there and I have to cross a fence. And I'm like, "Hold on, those guys don't. They've. I don't. First of all, I don't think they're duck hunters. And I mean, I love duck hunting too. Um, almost, I would say it's probably my first love.
Oh,
But
dang.
yeah,
I see. Now I
yeah.
feel like I know you better.
Well, it's kind of changed over the years, but it was my first love. Because I just love hunting with dogs, and so I get to that fence, and I'm like, this doesn't add up, and so I just pull up HuntStand and like look, and it's not on our property. It's literally 10 yards on the other side of the fence,
Hmm.
and so that's one of the things that I think has certainly changed too, is keeping people where they're supposed to be, keeping hunters out of trouble. And when there's a fence, obviously it's a dead giveaway. But a lot of times, public land boundaries end here, property line boundaries end here, and really, with the technology that's out there, there's not a lot of. I don't think the excuses are as viable as they once were. Like, because you can just everyone has it. If you're a serious hunter, you probably have a mapping app. I would think.
Yeah, yeah, no, it's been a game changer for that. And interestingly, I'll even tell you on the flip side, I've heard of a number of situations now, just just through people and in passing, where it's gone the other way, where some old boundary or some old fence that was up was actually inside of their perimeter. And so
Oh, maybe that pond is ours then.
there's been some land battles, man. Like this place I was hunting out in Nebraska, he's like, yeah, you see that fence right there? He's like, I didn't realize it, but until I was using your app, that's actually like 200 yards inside our property, but sort of like
Hmm.
common law, I guess, but more just like culturally. I'm like, well, are you going to start hunting that now? He's like, no, like I'm not
Yeah.
trying to get into cause a big war with the neighbors, but technically, if they were to survey this land,
Yeah.
that's on ours, you know. But some
Hmm.
people have actually. I have a buddy who gained like 5 acres on his mother-in-law's property,
Hmm.
which it was already a small property. I think it was only like 20 or something. So he gained five that were theirs, and they had to take it to court. But man, I mean, you're paying you're paying property taxes on it and this and that, and like if it's your ground, it's your ground. So there's a
Yeah.
fine line there. I mean, if you got a 300,000 acre ranch and you're going to cause a war over a little stretch, that's different. But he just gained 25% of the property.
Right. Right. So this is my first season using HuntStand. Been very pleased with the app's functionality. I'm really wading through right now trying to familiarize myself with it. And you were showing me one of the other cool features about HuntStand is that it's owned by GSM, which owns Stealth Cam and Muddy cameras. So if you have any of those cellular cameras, you can link it right up to the mapping application and integrate it that way, which is super cool. Um, One of the other things that I really like about it is the weather, um, real time weather, and I don't know how many people, if they don't pay attention to this, how many hunters they should, because I firmly believe in the solunar table in major and minor feeding phases, and that's also included right here. So a lot of people pay just for like a subscription just to have that. I mean, I know one of my best friends does. It's like, I don't know, it's $5 a month, and he has it on this little app. I'm like, you just now it's included in your mapping
Yeah.
app. It's right here. So convenient. So cool little things that I'm finding out as I'm playing around with it. Obviously, property lines is a huge part. That's, I mean, like we were just talking about. I think that's probably the number one thing people are using a mapping application for. And then we also need to mention the rut predictor from a whitetail standpoint, and that will essentially, you can, that would be an interesting thing for you to explain, is how you guys have compiled all that data for an entire country on how to predict the premier hunting dates in each geographic region.
Yeah, that's something that we're quite proud of because it took a significant amount of time and resources to make that happen. So there are a lot of predictors of whitetail activity out there. We realize that, and let's face it, some of that stuff becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy because you're probably going to go hunt when some if you're relying on a tool like that, you're probably going to focus most of your time out in the field when you're using a tool like that, and you're going to go when it says it's going to be good, and naturally certain number of those times you're going to shoot something. So you're going to kind of it's going to be self-fulfilling, whether it's scientifically accurate or not. You're going to have if you spend time in the field, especially like during the rut, for instance, like the odds are in your favor that something's going to end up walking in front of you at some point
Dude,
during
I hated the rut this year. I'm not gonna lie. Just a totally
that.
side note, like it was terrible. It was the middle of the rut, but I don't know. I mean, where I was set up, they were, as soon as the rut was over, here come the bucks all bachelored back up. They're done trying to
Yeah.
stab each other, shank each other, and they're all buddy buddy and like, hey, let's have a beer and let's forget about all that stuff we did to each other the last 2.5 weeks or whatever it was.
Right.
But yeah, I don't know. It was just not a lot of activity. We did have a full moon during the rut this year too, so I'm sure that affected it a little bit when I was out, when I had the opportunity to go. Anyway.
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy how much it can be hit or miss, or even just you move 200 yards this way or 200 yards that way, and
Mm,
the whole thing might change. But um, with our whitetail activity forecast that we have, to boil it down, we have a gentleman on our team named Brian Murphy. He's one of the foremost whitetail experts, period, of all time. And for what he doesn't know, he's able to make up for, because he runs with that circle of scientists and biologists and whitetail guys,
mm-hmm.
or the top dogs, the guys who have all the credentials at universities and have written books, and all the names that you could ever think of. He runs with them. So Brian joined our team, and one of the biggest projects he took on was building out this whitetail activity forecast. And being the fact that he is a biologist, there were going to be no smoke and mirrors, or he didn't want any part of it. It was going to be based on science. And so our algorithm is driven by a number of factors, just like any predictor of its type. Obviously, you've got weather and other things that go into it that have different weights based on what he was able to pull out of real research, not just by anecdotal stories or guessing, or some guy who's hunted for 20 years in some part of the country. That's all good, but radio collars don't lie, fetal surveys don't lie, all that kind of stuff. So
I went back while you were talking and just typed in on my own website, Brian Murphy, and he pops up here from 2012. We're
there
talking
you
about
go.
let's see. It seems like this one was about canned hunting and captive deer breeding. But anyway, interesting that yeah, 2012. So he's been around for a minute for sure.
Oh yeah. He was the main man over at QDMA
Mm-hmm.
for 20 years before he came to HuntStand. Obviously QDMA has now transitioned to become the
National Deer Association.
National Deer Association, with Nick Pinizotto and those guys who are still there. But just to break it down in its simplest form, the reason why our whitetail activity forecast is certainly the most accurate is because it's based on real data. And Brian took it upon himself to get with all of the state agencies and biologists in the whitetails range to accumulate the best possible data sets that they had around whitetail breeding activity. So that's how we were able to build out one of our map layers, which is the Nationwide Rut Map. So that Nationwide Rut Map breaks down all the different stages of the rut, which, if there's a scale of 0 to 100, you're never going to see more whitetail activity than you do during the peak phase of the rut. That's just an indisputable fact.
Right.
Unless there's like some really crazy weather event or something that were to force them, like this movie I was watching the other night on, I think it was on some new movie on Netflix with Julia Roberts, where there's some world event going on, and this little girl walks out in the backyard, and there's like 100 whitetails standing there staring at her, and there's like all these flamingos are landed in their pool and stuff. There's like some kind of extinction event about to occur, and all the animals know. But unless something like that's going to happen, you pretty much can bet that the rut is going to be when the most whitetails move. So without knowing specifically when the rut occurs, and we've got it even down to a county level, there's no way that you can have the best predictor of whitetail movement, because you need to know exactly when those times are. Now, that said, like I just mentioned, it is based off of the best available data that we were able to gather from every state agency. Some of it was higher level, and then some of it was down to him speaking to individual biologists from individual regions or counties. But he did all that vetting, and like I know where you were just at in Texas hunting, you had a discrepancy because you were right on a border between two significantly different whitetail herds. But the data that he got from the state of Texas, and which he, by the way, is still digging further into to see if we can refine it a little bit more. But you just happen to be right on a border. So nothing's perfect, and there's still a long ways to go with whitetail science. We all know that. I mean, look at CWD, for instance. We have barely even started to scratch the surface on that for real research up until the last 5 years because there was no funding for it.
Hmm.
So even though whitetail's the number one game animal in the world and we've been researching them for decades, we still got a ways to go. There's still some mysteries. So um,
Our state agency, I don't want to say they just stepped in it, but we just had a big deal here where so Texas Parks and Wildlife has really put the hammer down on the deer breeding industry as far as, transporting deer essentially because, of the fear of spreading CWD. Okay, that seems warranted, right? Very strict texting, etc., and live and post-mortem. And then at their own facility at the I think it was the Kerr Wildlife Research Center. I don't forget the exact name of the place, but they don't bring deer in or out, and it's their own herd that they've been studying for I think since 1954, somewhere in the tune of that amount of time frame. And the CWD just popped up and one deer, and they killed the entire herd. Well, how did that CWD get there if it's not caused by transporting deer, right? And it was the only deer that tested positive. Was they know because they killed every deer in there. So
yeah,
that like is there's going to be a lot more to come out of that situation because the deer breeders are pissed about that because like you told us it's our fault, and then here in your own facility in your own backyard, CWD just popped up. So going back to what you said of we still are just scratching the surface. That was a perfect example of that shouldn't have happened if it is what you said it is. So what is it? How does it occur? Who knows?
yeah, that's one of the hardest parts about science-based management is science is always a work in progress.
Yeah.
We're always testing new hypotheses and this and that, and like you just got to learn and adapt. It's when you stick to your guns with old information, that doesn't get anybody anywhere.
Why do you think the state of Tennessee's why do you think they lied about CWD positive test? Did you hear about that?
You know what? I heard about it in passing.
Uh-huh.
I didn't dig deep enough into it to be able to make any
I mean,
educated.
to me, it just says there's money, right? There's on some level, and it's like all politics, right? Wildlife management's not immune from politics getting involved or money. Like
Oh yeah, there's no doubt about that. I
to me,
can't
it was
speak
like I
to
didn't
that.
understand why you would fake these positive tests unless there's some financial benefit somewhere for somebody or for the agency. I don't know, but CWD is certainly the biggest hot button issue in the whitetail community, and I don't see that changing in the near future.
It is a hot button issue, and on a personal level, you know, I I fear for it because of situations like what you just said. I don't necessarily fear for it because of the actual scientific or biological implications. I fear about how it's going to be manipulated and bastardized for um, different agendas. And
Yeah,
namely, it worries me that the animal rights movement might use that to their advantage at
it's a
some point
great point.
by trying to
Yeah.
scare people about consumption of deer. If you even put that thought, I've brought this up to numerous people. Some agree, some don't. But um, if you even just plant that seed in someone's head who is either not engaged or on the fence about something like that, that's all it takes.
Mm.
If you got 5 million deer hunters who go deer hunting one weekend a year and they can kind of take it or leave it, and the next thing you know, their wife's driving to work, she sees a billboard on the highway that just says, "Is your deer meat safe?" with a image of a lady holding the kid and a dad bringing in some deer that he just harvested.
Mm.
How much is it really going to take for those guys to not go hunting anymore? All it's
Yeah.
going to take is one little provocation of doubt. So
Do you think you've ever eaten a CWD positive deer?
I don't think I could have. It's
Right.
all
That's the
it's
point,
possible.
right?
Yeah,
You don't know,
I
and
don't know.
I probably haven't, but I don't know. And but there are a lot of guys in the Midwest who probably have,
Oh yeah,
and
for
it
sure.
didn't kill them because It's never jumped the shark yet, as far as being transmitted from a cervid to a human. So, what's with the fear mongering? Like from those billboards that you're describing right there. Like I get it if
Well, they don't
we're worried
exist
about
yet. I'm just saying, I sure hope that they don't.
right, but they could, but it would
Yeah.
be totally misinformation. That's all it would be, because it's
Yeah.
not a real thing, as far as it hasn't happened yet. And I guarantee you, a lot of whitetail hunters have eaten CWD positive deer.
I'd say
Because
there's a 50-50
historically,
chance that I have.
yeah,
Probably a lot of people I know have. Now, that said, would I knowingly eat one?
I
I
would
would.
not. Right.
No. I mean, why would you? Why would you? I've talked to very well educated. I've seen a split on that too. I've talked to people who are super know more about it than me, who said they would eat it. Um,
I'm
I'm
not.
not in the camp. If
I
there's
had
anything questionable, I don't screw with it.
my buddy brought me back some halibut that he caught in Alaska. Giant halibut, beautiful steaks, full of worms. Like,
Yeah.
you can cook it and the worms aren't going to hurt you. You can also cook ducks with rice breast and it's not going to hurt you. But I can see it, and I'm not knowingly going to eat a parasite that I can see in the food. Like, this is gross. Like, I'm not doing
Yeah, I'm not about that life either myself. And I'm
that.
big into eating and cooking wild game. I've spent a lot of my career actually like writing recipes and stuff. So I'm pretty passionate about it, but not enough to knowingly eat something that's
So what do
contaminated.
you think about this? So I guess I'm going to cook it for dinner tonight. I shot a couple ringnecks the other day, and that's not a very, if you I don't know if you've ever duck hunted, but it's not a
Yep.
desirable
Yep.
duck for the table.
I've
I
killed them.
left the skin on them, and I'm going to just do a little, like, I've got a an apple jalapeno glaze I'm going to put on them, and we'll just see. I've also got a green wing teal right there next to it. I'm going to like compare and contrast, because it's been a long time. When I first started duck hunting, I didn't know that the ducks tasted any different until I did. And
Yeah.
so ever since then, the ringnecks have just gone in the, grind it or jerky it bag, But I was like, you know what? I only shot one, and I was like, this isn't enough to grind or whatever. I'm just gonna leave the skin on and really see if it's as bad as I remember. We'll see.
I am not too proud to say that, man, I have tried waterfowl a lot of different ways. And I mean, like, I've had a little bit of success with like wood ducks, grilling wood ducks and that sort of thing. But by and large, I'd be lying if I said that I've cooked a bunch of really delicious waterfowl.
Mm.
I've had some, but overall, I've struggled with it, and I've tried a lot of different things. I mean, think about the best thing you can do with anything that has a little bit stronger flavor is some type of brine where you impart flavor into it. But that's
Mm.
if you're talking about just the true test, salt and pepper, and throwing it on a grill or frying it up. I mean,
Maybe
let's
I won't put the glaze on there, just so we can really get the
yeah.
honest. Yeah.
I would put the glaze on there. You already know what you're up against. Just put the glaze on there.
Yeah. Oh man. Let's see
Jerky
what
though, like
what other.
jerky's and goose pastrami. Oh,
Oh yeah,
that's
my
legit.
buddy lives in Missouri. He comes down here to hunt feral hogs and ducks with me and another buddy every January, and he takes they do a lot of conservation snow goose hunting there, and so he brings me a big batch of goose pastrami from those conservation hunts, and it's killer. I love it.
Yeah. No, to be honest with you, so it's not like I shouldn't have generalized too much before when I said waterfowl. I've had some really good luck with snow goose, which get a terrible rap.
Sky carp.
Yep. The whole, yes, the nickname of sky carp and all that. And to be honest with you, depending on what my mood is, perhaps my favorite wild game is wild hog. I absolutely love it. I just made some last week. I made ginger teriyaki. I mean, everybody
Mm.
I've ever fed it to is like blown away. But also those get a bad rap. I feel like those fall in the same camp. People want to have an excuse to kill a pile of snow geese and not feel obligated to do anything with them. And people want to be able to eradicate hogs because they're a real problem and not feel the guilt of having to to do something with them.
I
So
don't feel any guilt. I'm not gonna lie. Now a snow goose, yes, but like if you live in Texas,
yeah,
there's I've killed in the last I don't know, since deer season started, 7 pigs that weighed between 180 and 220 pounds. I can't eat all those. And
oh
here's
yeah,
the reality: like everyone's like, "Well, you should call someone," and like, yeah, that's great. Let me get them on standby, and
yeah, right,
and they can drive 3.5 hours to the lease and come get it. And is and especially like it's colder right now, but especially if if you're say you're thermal hunting in the spring or summer, that thing's spoiled in an hour. Like
yep.
it's just not a real solution. You can't donate dead feral hogs to Hunters for the Hungry like you can whitetail, because of
That's what I'm saying. Just
brucellosis and trichinosis. So I like eating them, right? But there's just I'd have to buy 3 more freezers to put the damn things in.
absolutely, yeah. It's a whole it's a whole different problem. That's what I'm trying to say. Like, be honest about it. Like, if you're just gonna go eradicate them, then eradicate them. They need to be,
Yeah.
but don't say it's because they taste like crap. No, snow geese. I'll take a wild hog over a snow goose any day. But I've actually really good luck with eating snow geese. Even more than Canada's, and more than several species of ducks that I've tried. Because I heard the same thing, like, oh, these things are the worst. Now
Hmm.
that I'm still doing a decent amount of duck hunting, and I'm like, well, they couldn't be any worse than like a ringneck or
Right.
other divers or something. And sure enough, man, I thought they were great. Just cooked a medium rare, made some like some kind of, it was like blueberry reduction or something, or raspberry
Yeah.
reduction, like
I'm
the
in
label
on that.
for it. Super good.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
yeah, just if you're gonna do something, just be honest about it.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean you're
Well,
wrong.
it's like that 321-inch deer that the 94-year-old lady just shot here in Texas that's been misreported by NRA, Outdoor Life, I think Outdoor Channel, maybe even Field and Stream, all posted it was a free ranging, native deer. No, that lady's last name is Barry. Her son owns Barry Whitetails. They breed deer. They sell deer. They sell deer semen. Every deer that she's ever entered, and she is in like the Muy Grande Deer Contest Hall of Fame. 94 years old, and she's still out there killing deer. Kudos to Laura Berry for that. But let's not misrepresent what the deer is. If that deer was truly a free range buck, it would smash our state record by 40 inches from the 1892 Brady buck, which scored 282. And then we had another deer picked up in Junction, Texas in 1925 that scored 272. Nobody knows who shot that deer. Might have just been a deadhead. And then the biggest hunter killed buck in Texas was in 2013 in Houston County by Mark Lee, and it was like 268 and 4/8. And then you have this 321-inch deer, and everyone's like, "It's the biggest deer ever killed." No, 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 no. It's a. It might have been born in the pasture, but that pasture is high fenced. It
Yeah,
is what it is. So
yeah, yeah. Be fair to the animals, man.
yeah,
Whatever they're capable of producing is what they should be given credit for. That's like the deer that I told you about. You're probably like the one that I shot this year. Um, Probably like, oh, that's really not that big in the scheme
nah,
of what.
157. That's my biggest free range whitetail I shot in South Texas. It was just barely over 157. Yeah, it's a great buck.
Yeah, a lot of people. I mean, it's, yeah, especially now with the way that the speed at which information travels. It's like you open your feed and it's like 180, 180, 180, 180, 200, 200, 200, 170, 180. Like, but man, I've actually been thinking a lot about that lately, and it's just I don't know,
I
man.
can
It's
I
not
can tell you
accurate.
based off of my, let's just say, last 6 or 7 years of really hardcore whitetail hunting, and I can tell you I have hunted 4 bucks that have been like on my own leases, right? That have been over 155 inches, and I've killed 0 of them.
Yeah, yeah.
Like I know I had a 180. I know I've had one in the 170s. I had a freak in Oklahoma that, and some of it, some of it was, well, I think one time was really my fault because I went in, I had this 180 something buck coming in, not every day. And this was in October. And then I was like, but there were cows on the place, and the cows were also coming in. And when they were there, he wasn't coming. No deer were coming. So I was like, I'm going to fix that because I'm going to put up hog panels around this feeder. That way the does will always be there. And when the rut hits here in 2 weeks, he's going to be there. He never came back ever. He saw those hog panels, gone. And he was the kind of deer where in that area, if somebody would have shot him, like nobody knows what happened to the deer. I showed the neighbors pictures. They never saw him. And they were like, and they live there. And they're like, if somebody shot this deer, we'd know about it.
Yep.
Like, we've never seen that deer.
Yep.
And then another one in Oklahoma, they sold the property out from under me while I was in there hunting. They changed the locks, and I was like, "What in the world?" I didn't even know that they'd sold it. So that was a S show.
That's rough.
Yeah. And then I had one in the county I live in that was in the 170s, and that was the archery only. And it was only 20 acres, so the deer didn't live there, right? He's just passing through,
Mm-hmm.
and that it turned out to be very difficult to try to be on the property when he was on the property. I had talk about a lot of cell cameras trying to figure out where he was coming onto the property. I had like 7 or 8 cell cams on 20 acres. Never did see that deer on the hoof, but
And it's funny because
they're not easy to kill.
no, they're the ultimate survivor. I was just pheasant hunting yesterday all day. I don't it's kind of a running joke. I don't really bird hunt anymore at all. I don't know. Don't get me wrong. I really do enjoy it while I'm out there. I enjoy anything I'm doing while I'm out there. It's not my jam. I joke with my friends about it. I always give them shit when they're going bird hunting or whatever. But long story short, I couldn't deer hunt this weekend for some reasons. And my buddy invited me to go pheasant hunting. So I was like, sure. So we went from dawn until dusk yesterday. And we were hunting all like cattail sloughs and this big marsh country. So we're just pushing through jungle looking for these birds. And man, it's just amazing to see the tunnel systems that the whitetails have carved out in these spots. And I mean, there was deer sign everywhere, but where they can survive, it's more like where can't they survive? You know,
Yeah.
I mean, they are the most adaptable survivor as a big game species, and it just never ceases to amaze, man. They're unreal.
I think them and coyotes are the two that are in North America. It's like it
Yeah,
doesn't matter if it's an urban setting or rural or in the mountains out west. It makes no difference. They're
yeah,
going to be there. It's like,
they're scrappers.
yeah, yeah. Um, let's see. What else did I want to ask you about as far as, oh, well, so how much does it cost if you wanted to check out HuntStand? And are there different levels that you can pay for?
Yeah, so we still do have a free version that actually has quite a bit of functionality. Like you can still use it for basic mapping and laying out hunt areas and saving all your markers and drawing perimeters and lines and all that kind of stuff. Couple different layers for aerial views. Pretty robust functionality in that for being a free product, to be honest with you. And then from there, you go up to HuntStand Pro, which adds some things on top of that. So, for instance, with HuntStand Pro, you get the nationwide property information, so the boundaries and the landowner information. You
That's
get like
important for knocking on doors.
hugely important. I do a ton of door knocking, and I have really good success actually. But yeah, I've been able to get some incredible permission with that. And when you can go up to someone's door and ask for that person by name, it is like an immediate icebreaker. Especially when you're in the country, you're dealing with some older school people, and not just older school, but like older people, which is a lot of the people I run into, like retired folks who've never seen a hunting app. When you can roll up there and ask for them by name, it's a great icebreaker. And if you even just have a little bit of knowledge of their property going into it, sometimes that'll ignite a little bit of a spark in them, because you're not just like blindly going up, hey, can I hunt your property? Like if you can schmooze with them a little bit about it and say, yeah, it looks like that back corner of timber you have right there. I see there's a little creek. Maybe You ever see any turkeys back there? Like you can start to shoot the shit with them right away, and it helps. So it's not just being able to see where the lines are, being able to have their name and be able to go into the conversation with something is pretty nice. But also in HuntStand Pro, um, we've got some other types of map layers like detailed public hunting lands and the national aerial imagery layer, which is super high resolution aerial imagery, in most cases higher quality than what we're able to source through Google Maps. 3D, I could go on and on about 3D, but I use it a lot. And I'm not just talking about for Western mountain hunts where there's a lot of terrain, but it can be even probably more useful in areas where there's less terrain, because it's easy to identify all these little nooks and crannies that you would otherwise overlook if you're just looking at flat aerial imagery. So when you flip it into 3D mode, you just take your two fingers, you tilt the map, and then you can just fly around almost just like you're in a drone or something, and you can see all the little subtle changes in the landscape.
So
I
is
use
that how
that.
you were finding? Because you were telling me earlier off the air how you implement HuntStand in locating bedding areas after most of the vegetation has already, fallen off the trees and shrubs and everything.
So for me, for whitetails, I use 3D more so trying to consider like a entrance and exit routes for myself, like how
Mm-hmm.
I can get into spots without being seen where I think the deer are going to be, but then also considering how the deer might travel. Because you know how it is, like the more subtle the terrain, the more pronounced their travel routes can be. So like you find one little, even when I was out pheasant hunting yesterday, like all just the little subtle just rolls and creases and stuff. You look at a field, like a CRP field from the road, and it looks flat. And then you get out there and you see there's all these little subtleties. And sure enough, along all of them, you're going to find a deer trail. Um, and when it's even more limited, it funnels that activity even more because they don't have a lot of options. So for whitetails, I like to use 3D for that. For the bedding areas, like you're talking about, that's another thing that we have, monthly satellite imagery, which is also in HuntStand Pro. And you can literally go back. I don't know how far it goes back. It goes back years, but you can go back month by month and look at any spot, and you'll have a monthly snapshot of what that place looked like during that month. And so like with bedding areas, that's very helpful for looking at a spot during the time of the year when you have the least amount of foliage,
Mm-hmm.
least amount of vegetative growth, because you're going to see the plants that do persist, and you're going to see where those high stem count areas are for bedding areas vividly, because it's going to show those darker pockets. And if you're just looking at regular satellite imagery, a lot of times you wouldn't even be able to recognize those differences, those little nuances. Um, Sometimes you can, it's a little easier. But like you look at that monthly satellite, like around here, usually about April, May, once the snow is melted, or even sometimes when the snow is on the ground still, it can help because it gives real contrast. And then you can see, okay, in this timber, like where are the dark spots that are still there at the worst point of the year, the
Mm.
harshest time of the year. And I'll bet you $1 million that if there are deer in the area and you find one of those spots and you go walk in there during the winter, you're going to find beds, and you're going to find the browse line is going to be like every little bud of browse is going to be nipped off and eaten off. Like it's a no brainer. So it can actually, like if you're going to do some late season scouting, whether you're in somewhere with snow or not, you can go into these spots, um, rather than just like going and canvassing and grid searching and gridding out an area to try to get like that late season view. You can, if you only have so much time, you can do it with purpose. So you can go in there, start with that monthly satellite view and be like, all right, this is probably where these deer have been spending a lot of their time late season.
Mm.
And then that's, a lot of those spots are the same security cover that they're going to use throughout the year, because they're going to be the densest hellholes on a property, especially as soon as any amount of hunting pressure is applied. So it's not just a late season thing. It's
Yeah. Well, and it's
where
not
are
just
these deer
whitetail
going to
either.
retreat?
I mean, this is
No.
how I was telling you, like the first thing I'm going to do when planning an elk hunt is look for those, saddles on north facing slopes, and you're going to find bedded elk in there. That's just that, that's where they live.
Yeah.
And you can obviously use the mapping app to basically just lead you right to where the elk are going to be. And I've done it, and it doesn't mean you're going to kill them, but you're going to find them.
Yeah, at least you're not going out there blind. I mean, that's the biggest, especially out west when you're dealing with massive countries and someone new who's going out there for the first time. You can sit there and look at regular aerial imagery all day long. When you get there, it can be real intimidating, like
Mm-hmm.
to the point where the first time you go for a walk, you're like, how am I gonna, where do I even start? How do I do this? Like I've seen the look on people's faces, and I can kind of remember mine, like the first few times I went out there. It's like it's just a whole different playing field. So if you can have some starting points that at least like psychologically help get you going, if you go out there with a blank slate or not the right type of information, you're like, oh, that doesn't look anything like I thought it did. It's way farther, it's way harder to get to, or whatever. Like, that sucks. That is a bad feeling when you're like, this is not what I thought it was. But the
Yeah.
more time you spend, like you mentioned, saddle, like elk, north facing slopes. Well, flip it into 3D, cruise around some area that you know is accessible from where you're going to park, find that saddle, that is oriented so it has a north facing slope, and then maybe go look at the monthly satellite, and you identify a number of those spots. Maybe there's a burn by one of them. Like
Mm.
it's just honing just honing it down and running it through that funnel. And then what are your A spots, B spots, C spots, D spots? I mean, you can apply that same process to everything, even down to those piddly turkeys that I like to screw with that people
Right.
think is ridiculous, but it's all kind of the same process.
Yeah. Yeah. Where are the hardwoods? By water. That's where the turkeys usually going to be.
Yeah. Like I do an e-scouting. I've done a few e-scouting seminars for turkeys, and I mean, it's no matter where you are, it's the same thing. Terrain, big enough trees to roost in, a water source, and a good, reliable, like what we would call in whitetail hunting, I guess, a destination food source. If you can find all those things, there's going to be turkeys. If you're in an area that's just limited on all those things in general, and you can find trees and water, and there's turkeys around, there's going to be turkeys. Like whatever is the biggest limiting factor.
Mm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so, wait, what did you tell us what it cost though for the Pro? I don't remember.
I definitely didn't, and I wasn't avoiding it because it's going to be like sticker shock. It's quite the opposite. So for HuntStand Pro, $30 a year, you get all that stuff and some more that I hadn't talked about, for $30 for the whole country. So you look at some of our competitors, and it's more around like $100 for the whole country. But even just the property information alone, $29.99 for all 50 states property information.
Dude, I remember when we were going back to those SD cards from Onyx, like those were like 50 per
Yeah,
state, maybe
for
100.
one
I don't
state.
remember. It was a lot of money for once. I was like,
Yep.
my New Mexico chip card. Thank God. This was cost a lot of money. Like now you get the whole thing at your fingertips for $30.
Well, yeah, those things were even more the holy grail because you actually had to go out there to mark your shit. Like
Yeah.
there wasn't aerial imagery in those GPSs. It was just a pretty basic screen with the most basic maps. And I remember like I did some handoffs, and I remember there was also for a while there were uh there were people selling those, like making a business out of it. Like they were going pre-scouting areas and then selling those chips to people who wanted to go out.
Mm.
Like there were a couple companies that was part of their main offering. Like, hey, buy these micro SD chips for your GPS for your next hunt that you're going to go on. And
Yeah.
I'm sure they probably couldn't keep up with the demand at the time.
Yeah. Well, cool stuff, man. Like I said, I've enjoyed using it. This obviously being the inaugural season for me using this product, but super excited. super user friendly, which is always nice. And I think the integration with the trail cameras is I haven't really started to implement that yet, but I was telling you, man, I have like, I don't know, 12 cell cameras across 2 leases, one in Texas, one in Oklahoma. So that's going to be invaluable as far as that information. And then and the Command Pro app already will, like a relatively new feature, it already tells you what you're looking at. So it can categorize, hey, whitetail buck, feral hog, coyote, turkey, whatever it is that is in the photo. Now that the technology, another way that technology is advanced, it now can identify what's in the photo. Oh, a cow. Okay, we'll trash that. We don't want cattle. We don't want to save that. Whatever it is, it can, and then you can categorize it however you want, which is invaluable as far as not having to wade through thousands of photos.
Yeah. It's such a game changer, man. That filtering, like right now, late season here, it's just a matter of, are they moving during daylight at all or not? And I'm getting a ton of photos, and I'm at this point, you're kind of getting burned out on just every morning I get my update for Wisconsin 6 a.m. I'm just like scroll, scroll, scroll. So it's like, no, you don't have to do that. Like coming down to the wire, just filter it for bucks only during legal shooting hours, and you're gonna get your answer pretty quick. Is there anything out there moving, or is it probably not worth your time? So yeah, that filtering is sweet. And I guess I should mention, we went through kind of HuntStand Pro, which is at $30 a year. But then we do have the HuntStand Pro Whitetail tier, which is, if you're a whitetail hunter, that's the next level. And that's what's going to give you access to the whitetail activity forecast, the nationwide rut map, and also like a whitetail habitat layer.
That was
Which
probably super expensive.
for Pro Whitetail,
Yeah.
it's still it's $69.99, so it's 70
Oh my
bucks
God.
for the whole
No, I'm just
country.
kidding. It's a drop in the bucket. Like that's what one chip cost like years ago. One
Yeah, and
stamp.
like I said, competitively, if you look at, I'm not just trying to shill HuntStand, but like our feature set is pretty unbelievable between all the map layers, and then these deeper features like the whitetail activity forecast and 3D on all platforms. By the way, we were the first to have that on both mobile and desktop for Android, Apple, and desktop. Our competitors all started at desktop and they were hung there for a while, so we've had 3D the longest. Shout out to HuntStand.
Right.
But
Right on. Well,
yeah,
I'm
I love
excited
it.
about it, man. No doubt about that. And every time I open it, there's something else, something else to play with, to try to figure out how to utilize, because it's just a vast resource. So big fan. I appreciate your time today, and congrats on that monster Minnesota buck.
I appreciate it, man.
Yeah, it's been great visiting. I look forward to the next time.
All right, good luck with the rest of your season.
All right, take her easy.
See ya.